It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I am thrilled to have a brander on today. Kate DiLeo is a accidental brand strategist. She's a founder. She's an author of a book coming out right now called Muting the Megaphone. Kate's approach is branding is rooted in her firm's belief that brand is the path of least resistance to revenue. Now, interesting, right? Least resistance to revenue. And I'm really hunkered on that because I'm always looking at revenue generating activities. She teaches how to eliminate complex and ineffective brand storytelling by delivering a simple yet provocative message that tells prospects what you do, how to solve their problem, and how you differ from the competition. Well, Kate, I love that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted you on Her Success Story today.
Well, Ivy, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and to talk with you about branding and business.
So, accidental brand strategist, that I have to start there and tell me more. How did that happen?
Well, I call myself an accidental brand strategist because I'm an older millennial. I'm 36. And I think like many of us at this point in our careers, if you're in your 30s or 40s, a lot of us took a very zigzag path, I think, to get where we are. And for me, that was absolutely the case. I did not go to school to study branding. Ivy, I actually went to school to pursue a PhD in linguistic and cultural anthropology. And when I was about to start
I have to tell you, I don't even necessarily know what that is.
Okay. Well, do you know what it is? Let me explain. Basically, it's all about how language shapes culture and what we experience around us and how culture shapes language.
And isn't this a little bit about messaging and branding?
I mean, here's what's so funny, right? I have come full circle, but what happened to me, and I'm sure this happened to many, is I graduated my undergraduate right around the time that the market crashed. So I was in this position where I was either going to continue to pursue my graduate and post-grad work, or I was going to go get a job. And I had to go get a job because we just didn't know where the field of anthropology was going to be. So I went out, and for me, it was through the course of a sales and marketing career, Ivy, that I've actually really found my way into spending the last decade honing this career in branding.
So in looking forward, you talk about like eliminating the, for lack of a better word, the hype that goes into branding.
Yes.
There's always like, I'll speak from the heart, and 20 some odd years in the printing business in marketing and advertising, branding is a big deal. And when I've gone to brand my own companies, it's almost an intimidating process because it's such a big deal process and it's a lot of work and a lot of time. And it just seems to me that you cut through so much of the BS and the crap.
Thank you. I mean, that is really what I've spent so many years trying to help hone in on, is the fact that whether we like it or not, can we just call out the fact that marketing and branding sound like such fluff, don't they? They just sound so nebulous. But I take this lens that your brand, as I said, is your path of least resistance to revenue. It's really a tactical and practical weapon for revenue generation. And the reason I say that is because at the end of the day, I don't care how beautiful your logo is, how great your colors are, how fabulous your website is. Your brand is about the promise of what you put into the market, of who you say you are and what your client can experience with you. Bottom line, it's your message. And if your message is too fluffy and verbose and it doesn't get to the point, you've missed a critical opportunity to engage your customer and allow them to have a conversation with you. That's ultimately the goal of brand.
So as you work with your client, how do you keep them focused? Because I think sometimes, we see things and we have our methods and our systems, but then it's also helping the clients and help them focus to get through a branding process.
Branding is definitely, can feel like an exhausting process. And I've worked with almost 300 founders globally. And by this point, you see a pattern, right? I have a founder that comes into the room and they look at me, they're like, I know I need to do this, but I'm very scared and I'm exhausted and I don't have much time. And here's what I just want to kind of say is I think the first thing that we want to do if you're starting a branding process, helping stay focused is really about recognizing that this is not about writing everything under the sun, but about recognizing that it's about honing in on a couple big things. One, how does your company or your brand already authentically show up in the world? Two, who are you systematically going after and why? Target audiences. And then three, how do you write a simple yet provocative message that just articulates the problem that you solve, that invites them to want to come to the table? I think keeping leaders focused on the power of brands starts by recognizing that brand is not story, it is a conversation, it is very simple, it's to the point. And it frees you up to have that conversation day in and day out, whether you're in the Zoom room, somebody sees it on your website, you're at a networking event.
So when you take your clients through what I'm going to say is your process, the Kate DiLeo process, right? What are some of the surprises on their side? I always ask people about the surprises of building a business, but I want to switch it up a little bit.
Well, okay. All right. This is so fun. So it's so interesting. And by the way, I have to tell you, here I am in this position where I'm dealing with people's brands and their businesses. And it's definitely a position of honor. And I'm very grateful to be able to be trusted in that work, right? Because I don't come in naively thinking that I'm supposed to know everything about somebody's organization. No, you're coming in, right? You're coming to the table telling me, Kate, this is why I even built this business. In the process of writing a brand though, Ivy, I think that there's a couple big aha moments that most people have. And I think the first one is recognizing that as an organization and as a brand, we are not in the business of convincing. We're in the business of converting. It's amazing when I see the light bulb moments in people's eyes when I say,
hold on. I'm going to interrupt you right there. Let's talk about the different differentiation between convincing to converting.
Okay. Most of us assume, sometimes from a place of fear or naivete, that, well, we have a great brand and technically speaking, everybody could and should and want to buy from us. Okay, well, technically speaking, you're right, but technically speaking, not everybody will. And the reality is that great brands do not try to convince everybody in the world to buy from them. Great brands do an excellent job of niching in onto the one or two, maybe three target audiences that have the highest probability of buying, that have the deepest level of pain that they can solve, that have the deepest level of personality that's going to match and mesh with your organization. See, it's not about trying to convince somebody to purchase from you and trying to convince them to understand what you do. It's really about having a message that almost reads somebody's mail and gets that person to go, oh my gosh, you get me? I need to have a conversation with you. That's a conversion brand. That's a brand that did its job to go, I get you. I delivered this message at the right time. I know what you need. And now you get to take the step to come to the table and talk with me.
So out of the hundreds of clients you've worked with over the last many years, what has surprised you? What have you learned?
Well, I think what's been fascinating for me, and I have this scientist brain behind me. I think that was my anthropological training. There is a pattern. When I first got into this business, I thought, wow, every brand I'm going to write is going to be so different and so unique. And yes, the words are different. But Ivy, what's fascinating is that if we look at the pattern of buyer psychology, it is very, very simple. What people want to know in order to take the next step. And every brand that I've worked with has actually said, oh my gosh, you're correct, Kate. And the pattern is this, is every brand that does a good job of getting people to the table says three things in this order. One, they tell you what they do. Two, they then say how they solve your specific problem. And three, they then tell you 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 big bullets around how they're different and better than the rest. That is the formula of a brand that converts. And it blew my mind in this process of doing this for the last decade that, wow, no wonder branding sounds so expensive and exhausting and nebulous and arduous is because we're overcomplicating it, aren't we? We're overcomplicating the power of a brand that just creates conversation and allows people space to ask a question and make a decision.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, what drove you to write a book? I mean, and and everybody says, "Oh, everybody has to write a book." But when you sit down to actually write a book, it's a lot of work. Number two, you're a mom, you're a busy woman. You have a company, you're a mother, you have a lot of moving pieces. What drove you to write the book, and why now?
Well, I'll tell you what, this book almost didn't happen. What's fascinating is about a year ago, Ivy, about a year and a half ago, I hit extreme burnout in my business. I was at the top of the game, hustle, middle of COVID. We were all burnt out, weren't we? I mean, let's be honest. I think most of us were just zoomed out. And here I was in my game, just running my show. And I got very sick physically. So I actually had a couple of doctors that I ended up having to work with. I was pretty close to a heart attack. I would look down at my Fitbit, and my resting heart rate sitting in my desk chair was well over 100 to 120. That's not healthy, sitting in a chair. It's like you're doing cardio in a chair, right? So long story short, this book, this idea of writing down my practical approach to branding had to go on hold. I basically decided I was going to say no to this book and say no to everything for well over a year. And it wasn't until December of 2021 where this book kind of reburgeoned itself a little bit and came back up out of the woodwork and said it's time. And the reason it was really time was because I was actually beginning to have people ask me, could you write it down? Could you just give me the step-by-step? Could you help me understand the 1, 2, 3, even if I can't work with you one-on-one, Kate? So it was, I'll be honest with you, Ivy, and I talked to a lot of authors. Most of us have no desire to write a book. Like if you'd asked me 3 years ago to do this, I would say that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And here I am with a book coming out.
I'm actually going to say that is very true. I remember an old client who said to me, this was back in the day almost, and I used to write handwritten notes on our sessions.
Yes.
And she looked at me and she goes, "You're going to put all that into a book one day." And I said, "Not on your life."
Yes, I had the same person that told me that. I said,
right?
Absolutely not. You've lost your mind.
You lost your mind, never going to happen, X, Y, and Z. As 2022 is bringing me to, starting to plan the ending of book number 3 right now.
Right.
For early next year. So it's that gut instinct of absolutely, obviously you were looking at the other person and not me until there's something so important that needs to come out. Or we're looking at so many people who are overcompensating, and we say, just here's the simple, here's the lowdown, here's some action steps.
That's right. And this book is not a business book. And what I mean by that is, I certainly share like some pretty short stories on the front of each one, but actually it's very tactical. So it's only 100 pages. And I mean, it's got charts, it's got graphs, it's got like formulas in there of how to write a tagline, and it's implementation checklists and all the stuff that you would have to highlight and scribble and write down, right, to actually get this done. And I wanted to give people something that was a very small but mighty brand guide. That really, if you had a pocket brand book, this would be it, to actually understand the 1, 2, 3 of how do I write and implement a brand that's going to win more work.
I love that. So Muting the Megaphone, although you wrote stop, and the tagline of the book is stop telling stories and having conversations and start having conversations. It's really the power of the mini, this is what you could do right now.
That's right. And I think
it's simple and it's actionable. And there's nothing I love more is simple and actionable steps and having people stop overproducing so much.
I agree. I think what's fascinating too is I think this book came to be on the edge, on the recovery side of me getting sick and hitting burnout, is that I had to go through the process of muting megaphones in my own life. I fired my coaches. I stopped showing up at social events. I blocked my schedule. I got done with work at 4 p.m. every day. I went home to my 4 babies. I took care of my health. I spent time with my husband. I did the things that I realized I was putting on the back burner from a place of desperation. One of my mentors a long time ago told me, Kate, are you leading from a place of invitation or desperation? And I think as leaders, what's often the case is we go through these cycles and these moments in our lives where we have to sit up and really reflect and ask ourselves, are the actions and the steps that I'm taking right now in my business and in my life, am I doing this from a place of fear, of should, and could and would? Or am I doing this from a place of confidence and from a place of peace and from a place of I'm going to welcome into my life the right thing at the right time? That was hard for me, Ivy. I had to learn how to say no to the good in order to say yes to the great. And it was only when I did that that this book came to be.
I mean, that happens to be very true. I know when I come from a place in my business, I come from a place of ease and grace.
Yes.
You know, it's a dancer in me, right? You know, oh, everything should be graceful. You know, look at the fluid lines, you know, ease and grace. And when business isn't flowing for me that way, what's going on?
That's right. I was a dancer as well for many years. And I was a ballroom dancer. And I remember I learned the principles of how that applied to other areas of my life. I learned, wow, I'm so type A. Where am I trying to lead my poor partner instead of sitting back and allowing them to lead me? You know, there's all these analogies you and I could talk about, right? But I think the thing is that, you know, whether it's with your brand or your business or your career, I think sometimes we are so focused on the next thing that we forget to sit back and really ask ourselves, is it even the right thing? Is it even the right time? How willing am I to let certain things sit and stew? And even in branding, that's part of the work that I teach, is helping people understand, not yet. What you just told me was a great idea. Not yet. Be okay with where your brand is today and grow into that next phase at the right time, so that you have the best possible opportunity of reaching as many people and helping as many people as possible.
Love that. So Kate, if we ask for one tip you would share with our audience who could be saying, hey, I'm maybe look at my branding, or maybe it's time to rebrand, or, oh God, rebranding. What is one tip that they can take away with from our conversation today, although there's been many, that they can then breathe through with a bit of ease and grace and look at their branding?
I think the biggest tip that I can give you is to really own with confidence who you are and what you do, how you help people, how you deeply solve somebody's problem, and actually own how you're different and better than the competition. And while that might feel scary, many of us go, well, I don't want to compare myself, or gosh, that sounds very cocky. No. It's not pretentious. It's confident and it's provocative. And great brands are truly just standing from a place of humble confidence and honor in that. And you realize that when you do that, like attracts like. People are drawn to you and they will want to partner and work with you.
Love that. Share with our audience how they could learn more about the book and follow you. And listeners, just don't panic. All these links are going in the show notes. Listen and think about what you're going to do about today's conversation as Kate shares.
Well, first off, thank you. The easiest way to find me is actually checking out my website, which is www.katedileo.com. You can learn more about speaking I've got coming up around the country. Of course, the book is out there if you're curious about getting your own brand guide to really walk through it and more. And if you're a follower of Ivy's and you're listening to this and you're on LinkedIn, I would love for you to also connect with me there. Send me a message if you've got a brand question. I welcome those questions and would love to actually get to know you and learn about your business and your path.
I love that. And I love how personal you make it, because branding is about being the real, authentic selves we are.
Yes.
Awesome. Listeners, what I was just saying is take a moment and think about, what did you learn? What's your your takeaway from today? Make a note of it. And then plan an action around it. Is that action to look at your branding? Is that action to ask Kate a question? What action works for you by showing up here today? And then remember, if this episode made sense to you, had an impact for you, hit share and share that forward to somebody that it will also be helpful with. Thank you for joining us here on Her Success Story. See you next Monday.